Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Welcome to another edition of Football 24/7. He's John McMullen, and I am your guy, Tone DeShields II. As you guys can already see, I am not in my usual digs, John.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you know, I had to be. We all got to do it occasionally, Tone. You're at a wedding, so yeah. Think about all the excitement you're going to have at the wedding. Don't worry about the hotel room.
Love is definitely in the air, my man, for sure. And the love is definitely flying high right now with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are right now 8-0 on the season. And, you know, today was their first full practice in 2 weeks, John?
Full practice. Let me think about that. Yeah, about Wednesday, a little bit more than 2 weeks because they had the short week. So it was all walkthroughs. So yeah, it's been a while. This team hasn't played that much over the past month. You have the bye and then the mini buys pretty much, back and forth. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, I think the bye was a little bit early. You prefer it to be a little bit later when the natural bangs and bruises of an NFL season kind of pile up a little bit on you. So from that standpoint, probably not great. And then you have the mini bye, which was even a little bit bigger this year for the Eagles because you have Thursday followed by Monday night. So you even get an extra day. Probably a little bit too close together. But, you know, it's an 8-0 team. So there's not a lot of stuff to complain about. So you look at the schedule and say, could have been better. Could have been better from the Eagles' perspective. If it were set up a little bit differently, but control what you can control. That's what the coaches always say.
Yeah, and that's also Jalen Hurts' mantra, right? You know, always the runners always do, right? And they always have to take it 1 week at a time. Always got to go 1-0 each and every week. So you were down at the NorvoCare complex today. And they had a special guest, Malcolm Jenkins. I heard, man. What was that about? What were those vibes like?
Malcolm was in. Malcolm lives here, so it's not rare. He was doing a speaking engagement earlier in the day. Just came down to take practice in. So not that rare. Malcolm does that a lot. I think. He had one of his town halls at one of the local high schools for social justice and things he's passionate about. So he was doing that earlier in the day and then came down to watch practice. And obviously he's a big part of this organization and was a tremendous player for this organization. So, you know, ex-players stop in every now and again. It was fun to see Malcolm today. And he's, you know, if you think about that Super Bowl team, somebody asked me that on another radio show I was doing a hit with, and they were comparing the Super Bowl team versus this Eagles team. Now, a lot of things have to go right to win a Super Bowl. The stars have to align, even though coaches don't like hearing that term luck. You got to have some luck. And, I was around that Super Bowl team every day from day one of training camp to Minneapolis. And I've been with this team every day pretty much. And this team's more talented. I don't know if they're going to win the Super Bowl, but they're more talented than that Super Bowl team. I will say that.
Yeah, you said something interesting, right? The fact that you do have, some luck is involved in winning a Super Bowl and being successful. Despite preparation, you can prepare. There's some things that just don't go your way. It could be injuries. It could be so many different things. And, two things that come to mind from that Super Bowl season were two injuries that weren't even on the Eagles. Well, one injury and one suspension. The Aaron Rodgers shoulder injury that sidelined him for the whole season. And then Ezekiel Elliott being suspended for damn near the entire season. I think about maybe over half of the games or something like that. And I think those were two significant situations that played a key role in the Eagles' path to success. But, when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles this season, right, and you think about that Super Bowl team from years past, outside of the talent, because you believe this team is more talented, I might have to agree with you on that. But from the nuance, right, from an intangibles perspective, what do you think sets this team apart from the former Super Bowl team, or if they're similar?
Well, the quarterback. I think the quarterback is sort of the epicenter of it all. I think we talked about a lot with Carson Wentz. Now, the bad things didn't happen for Carson until later in his career. And the injuries were probably a part of it. No, not probably. They were definitely a part of it. But even pre-injury, and remember, he was playing at an MVP level, very similar to Jalen Hurts this year, who's playing at an MVP level. But he was always, personality-wise, he was always more of the introvert, which is, I think, difficult to be at the quarterback position.
Right.
Kept to himself. And by that, I don't mean on the podium or to the fan base. I meant in the locker room, kind of kept to himself. And as I said, just an introverted personality. Jalen kind of, and you see it all the time. I mean, Jalen we all know people who kind of take over a room, whatever you want to call it, light up a room, have these big personalities. For whatever reason, Jalen Hurts is one of those guys that people gravitate towards and follow. So that to me would be the biggest difference. He's a natural leader, and they didn't have that on the Super Bowl team. They just had a guy who was playing really, really well. So there are different ways you can go about things, but from that intangible standpoint, I think that's the difference. But there's not, Jalen's 24 years old, and you could talk about Donovan McNabb, you can talk about whoever you want. It's rare that such a young man is that much of a leader on a football team, especially with guys like Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, veteran players that have been here for a long, long time, and he's still sort of taken over the team. It's kind of amazing from that standpoint.
Yeah, I was watching Jalen Hurts' interview on the Kelce podcast, New Heights, obviously with the Kelce brothers, and Jason mentioned the fact that he was closer to retirement the year before Jalen got there versus, I guess, at the end of last season. And he said the main reason he stuck around is because he felt, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he essentially felt like he had to be along for this ride. He felt like something was coming. Jalen said he talked to him a little bit, and you see the way Jason Kelce, and you mentioned Jalen Hurts, he operates like this young veteran, like this old soul, right? And you see the reverence that Jason Kelce looks at him with and treats him with. Can you speak on just how having a guy like Jason Kelsey with Jalen Hurts, how that just, in my opinion, fast tracked it, his development and understanding of the game?
Yeah, it's just, it's one of those things, and that's why you call it intangible. And a lot of people don't like that because you can't quantify it. The age of analytics. It was funny. Somebody asked Jalen today about how he did against the blitz in Houston. He did really well from a statistical standpoint. He was like, "Oh, I didn't know." To him, it's all right. That's what they're doing. Let's try to take advantage of what they're doing. And to other people, it's like, oh, they're looking at the analytics. No, they're not. They're running their offense. From the standpoint of the leadership, it's just it's what he does. It's natural to him. And I shouldn't say it's what he does. He doesn't do anything. That's just who he is. And it stems, and he talks about it a lot, from his fathers, his dad and his coach, and Nick Saban and Lincoln Riley, and Nick Saban especially. I think Nick Saban is the guy who deserves most of the credit, because you see it with Tua in Miami. He's having a great season. You see it with Mac Jones in New England. He's not having a great season, but if you listen to people about Mac, they say the same thing: great leadership skills, all that type of stuff. So there's a common theme, and that's Nick Saban. I think he teaches young men the right way to play football. You constantly hear about Jalen saying rat poison, avoid the rat poison. That's all Nick Saban. That's straight out of the Nick Saban playbook. So I think Nick Saban probably deserves most of the credit, and the Eagles are very lucky. But I will say this about the Eagles, and they hate that term. That's been a term all week, mainly about turnovers. But, the Eagles kind of want people to forget they didn't know about Jalen Hurts. I argue this with Ed Kratz, my buddy from Sports Illustrated, because he's all on this tangent about the Steelers should have taken Jalen Hurts. And you mentioned that podcast. Jalen said he thought he was going to go to Pittsburgh. Indianapolis.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly.
Well, not that he thought it, but they need a quarterback, and they didn't choose Jalen Hurts. But the Eagles, they didn't know what they had in Jalen Hurts. They're calling about Russell Wilson in the offseason, about Deshaun Watson in the offseason. They didn't know either. Now, I think maybe the coaching staff had a better indication, than the front office. But nonetheless, this organization as a whole, I'm going to be blunt here. They didn't want Jalen Hurts. They wanted an upgrade. So sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Hey, sometimes you don't know what you have until it's gone. And luckily, Jalen Hurts, he wasn't out the door. They moved on from the guy Carson Wentz. Obviously, like you said, this leadership, the way he approached the game, it can't be quantified. But let's speak on something that can be quantified, and the fact that Jalen Hurts is steadily and obviously improving as a passer, and he's running significantly less, especially these past few weeks. He seems to be running with more intention. Well, he's always run with intention, but he seems to rely less on that and rely more on going through his progressions and delivering the ball down the field. And the numbers say he's running less on first and second down and third down, and he's just, again, he's fast tracking his development as a passer. And I don't think anyone really saw this coming. They have the Washington Commanders this week, week 10, and they have a very, very dominant pass rush. And, I'm curious to know, what's your thoughts on the fact that he's been running less? And then also, can that trend, or will that trend keep up in week 10 against the Washington Commanders? Because they do have a very dominant pass rush, and they give a lot of guys a run for their money, no pun intended.
Yeah, I don't think it's a plan. I think people who think the Eagles said we got to run Jalen Hurts less. I don't think that's the case at all. I think people around the league have looked at the Eagles and tried to develop plans on how they're going to stop the Eagles, and they're more concerned with the running of Jalen Hurts and the off schedule stuff than the passing stuff. Now, maybe that changes in the coming weeks, and you'll see a little bit of a market correction. Bottom line is, early in the season, he got a lot of man-to-man coverage, a lot of guys turning their backs, and he could run right behind it. And now he's getting a lot of zone, and they're daring him to throw the football in the zone, and he's doing it successfully. But, eyes are all on the quarterback because they're concerned about getting gashed. So I think it's got more to do with what the defense is doing, and that's the beauty of the Eagles' offense. Nick Sirianni says this all the time. If I got to run him 20 times, I'll run him 20 times. If I got to throw it 50 times, I'll throw it 50 times. What do they need to do to win a specific game? That's what the Eagles' offense is about. That's what they're doing. There's no cognizant plan of, oh, we can't let Jalen Hurts run. It's just, if you're playing zone coverage, if the eyes are on the quarterback and Dallas Goedert's open and A.J. Brown's open and they're always open, he's going to throw the football.
But here's the thing, right? I know you say that's not a cognizant plan, at least from the coach's perspective, right? But let's think about what Jeffrey Lurie has wanted all along, a high-powered, a high-flying passing offense, right? So that, in turn, is the plan, right? To have a high-powered passing offense, and Jalen Hurts, by the numbers, is running less and passing more, or relying more on his pass, right? So isn't that, I guess, maybe not by design by the coaches, but just a byproduct of the plan overall by the organization?
Now, one thing about Nick, like he'll pay lip service to that kind of stuff in the off season. He'll talk about it, and then when it comes to the regular season, to his credit, he's going to try to win on Sunday. This week it's a Monday. Last week it was a Thursday. He's going to try to win on a game day, and if Washington shows up and they play all man coverage, you're going to see a lot more runs from Jalen Hurts. I don't think that's going to happen. They're a zone team to begin with. And you're going to see more coverage. But, there are some blitz-heavy teams. The Giants down the road with Wink Martindale. He likes the blitz. You might see more running. Cover quarters teams. The Eagles are a predominant quarters coverage team. Vic Fangio sort of mentality, which is basically half the league. When you see that, probably going to see more throwing. But yeah, it depends on how defenses are trying to play him. And defenses, and there was an ESPN story this week asking a bunch of executives what they think of the Eagles. And most teams still think that the best way to beat the Eagles is to force Jalen Hurts to throw the football. So most people still around this league are questioning his ability to throw the football consistently more than his ability to gash them in the running game and with off-schedule offense.
So at what point does that straw break the camel's back, right? At what point does these executives finally look in the mirror and say, wow, okay, we got this thing wrong. This kid is slinging a rock. At some point, they're going to have to respect this man's passing because he's completing well over 65% of his passes right now, and he's moving the chains. He throws a very pretty deep ball, and the guy's winning. So at what point does the rubber meet the road with these executives, John?
Well, remember, it's not necessarily that they think he can't throw the football. It's sort of you're weighing, you're picking your poison. That's one of the things with the Eagles that make them difficult. Like most teams, even with great quarterbacks that we all know, Tom Brady, Tom's not going to run the ball, so you can play in a certain way. The Eagles make it so difficult. And I said, if I were a defensive coordinator, I've asked this question. I ask it to a bunch of guests on Birds 365 as well. I think about what am I going to take away? what am I going to take away first if I'm playing the Eagles? And my answer is, I don't know. I mean, I know I'm not going to try to stop the conventional running game. I'm not too worried about that. But am I trying to stop Dallas Goedert, AJ Brown? I guess AJ would be number one on my list. But then you kind of know you're going to get gashed by Dallas or vice versa. Or it could be Devontae Smith, or it could be Jalen Hurts running the football. It's a tough offense to deal with. Nick knows it, and Nick takes advantage of it.
Hey, what more can you ask for? A couple more questions before we close this thing out. Injury updates, right? I saw, or I heard rather, Jordan Davis was at the facility and he's walking around without a brace, without a boot. That clearly is a good sign. But overall, what have you seen? What have you heard around this team about the latest injury updates?
Yeah, I saw Jordan today, and he was in good spirits. But remember, he's on injured reserve, so
Right.
he's out for 3 more games, no matter what. Earliest he can come back is December 4th, which would be perfect because that's when Tennessee and Derrick Henry come in, so they could use him for that particular game. We'll see how that shakes out. The biggest concern is Avonte Maddox. We're only on Thursday, but if I were a betting man at Ocean Casino and Resorts,
Nice plug there, John. Nice plug.
I would not count on Avonte Maddox playing. He tweaked his hamstring in Houston, and it didn't look great. He was hobbling off the field into the injury tent. He was not at practice today. And Josh Joe, for instance, the undrafted rookie corner, also has a hamstring injury, but he was on the field watching. Avonte wasn't even on the field, so that gives you a clear indication they didn't even want him near the field. His is probably a little bit more serious. So I would not count on him playing on Monday night. The good news is Josiah Scott was back at practice, limited, but back at practice. So that's a very good sign that he'll be ready. And that's big because if you didn't have both slot corners, Josiah Scott is a backup to Avonte Maddox, that might have been a problem. But looks to me like Josiah's going to be able to play. But I wouldn't count on Avonte Maddox.
You mentioned that game where Jordan Davis has the opportunity to come back against Derrick Henry and those Titans, and he is clearly the driving force of their offense. But I'm curious about this next 4-game stretch after the Commanders game: the Colts, the Packers, the Titans, and the Giants, and that's going to be the toughest stretch in terms of the running backs they're going to have to face. I know Nick Sirianni spoke today for a moment. What were their thoughts about defending the run going forward without Jordan Davis? Did they speak on that? Did JG speak on anything? What's your thoughts overall about this?
The Eagles aren't a good tackling team. I mean, they're just not, and they're not going to be. We've seen enough, and they've done this. There's a give and take, and they got playmakers in the secondary. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is leading the NFL in interceptions. James Bradbury doing a tremendous job. Very savvy player. We all know Darius Slay. What do those 3 guys have in common? They're not great tacklers. But would you rather have Chauncey making these game-changing plays, or would you rather have some box safety who wraps up well? And think about it last year with Anthony Harris and Rodney McLeod. They've made this decision that it's more important to stop the passing game in this league than the running game. And so far they're 8-0, so I can't really complain that much. But you look at Tennessee and you look at Derrick Henry specifically. I'm going to be interested to see that game. It's a ways to go, but boy, if Jordan Davis isn't back for that one, this get on. It's going to be ugly.
Good luck, Chuck. Final question before we get out of here, John. You know, the Eagles have played 8 games thus far. They're 8-0, you know, like it says on the bottom of the screen. And, you know, the road gets a little tougher just because of the road games. You know, they have a very strange stretch being on the road against the Cowboys and so on and so forth, and the Bears and whatnot. But they play 8 games. At this midpoint in the season, who is your offensive MVP for the Philadelphia Eagles, and who is your defensive MVP?
That's a good question. Offensive MVP, mine is A.J. Brown. Now, most people are going to say Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts is leading the MVP betting markets, or second, depending on where you look. But for me, and I've said it since the start, A.J. Brown's the domino. Everything falls into place because of A.J. Brown's presence. And, you know, Devontae Smith is a really nice receiver, but he's not a wide receiver one, not at this stage of his career. And that's what he was last year. And you saw it. At times, the Eagles were good. At times, teams were able to shut them down. Now he's a wide receiver too, and he might be the best, or certainly top 5 in the league at that role. Quez Watkins as a wide receiver too? That's not good. As a third receiver who can just run by people on occasion, that's fine. Dallas Goedert is really the second complementary receiver. He's great in that role. So A.J. Brown's presence has sort of put everything into place for the Eagles. That would be my pick on offense. On defense, it's even more difficult because the value of different positions, everybody's going to look at the value of edge rusher, Hassan Reddick. The corners, Darius Slay, James Bradbury are playing lights out. My pick is T.J. Edwards, the quarterback of the defense.
The unsung hero.
Yeah, the most underrated player on this team. You know, if you look at all, you know, PFF, I think people don't realize, have him as the 6th best linebacker in the entire NFL. I think for whatever reason, people in Philadelphia don't realize how good he is. And that would be my pick on defense.
Oh man, I think I might have to agree with you on that. You know, A.J. Brown, like you said, is the domino. He makes everything fit into place. And then T.J. Edwards, in my opinion, he is another domino that makes sure everyone is exactly where they need to be. I believe he's he's directing traffic out there on defense. But man, great show, John. As always, we appreciate your work and we appreciate your insight, especially. You know, you guys have been locked in on Football 24/7 with John McMullen. Make sure you guys smash that like button. Make sure you guys continue to stay engaged on the content. Comment below. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. And also, if you want more from John McMullen, if you guys are an avid reader of his work, make sure you guys go check out jakibsports.com. That's JAKIB Sports.com. Once again, you guys were locked in on Football 24/7 with John McMullen. And I was your humble host, and I am, rather, your humble host, Tone DeShields II. And take care, you guys, man. We appreciate it. More love, stay humble, stay healthy, and most importantly, stay hungry. And fly, Eagles, fly.